Let's go to this story now. Does our parole system do enough to curb repeat offences, or are we missing the mark entirely? South Africa's parole system is in the firing line due to the alarming rate of reoffending by parolees who struggle to leave their life of crime behind. But how is an inmate assessed for parole? Let's hear from the Correctional Services Department, Singabakho Nxumalo. Mr. Nxumalo, thank you very much for speaking to us here on eNCA. Of course, a lot of South Africans must have been shocked when they heard that answer from Justice and Correctional Services Minister Ronald Lamola, saying 337 people were killed allegedly by parolees between March 2020 and sometime this year, the first 3 months of this year. It might be a 3-year period, but it's still too many murders happening because of people who abscond parole. Wouldn't you agree?
Very good afternoon, and thank you for having us. Firstly, you are correct in saying that we are looking at a period of over 3 financial years, from the 1st of March 2019. And when you look at the number of people who are placed on parole, currently we are sitting at about 66,000. But what is also important to highlight is that at a go, the number of people placed on parole has been decreasing over the years because of the stringent measures that we're putting in place in order to ensure that people who are placed out truly deserve to be out. But then, even if it's just one person going back into the life of crime, that does concern us. But as a department, we said these numbers, yes, they do look big, but there is a decline, although one person being hurt, it does cause a dent. Hence, the process of reviewing our parole system is so important, and that way is currently, that work is currently underway.
And I mean, if you look at it, what is the criteria before somebody is released on parole, especially if the person had absconded parole before, came back into the system, and then applies for parole and goes back out only to reoffend again? We have that example, for instance, in Limpopo. I'm sure you remember the story of that little girl who was murdered. Allegedly, one person involved did it for the second time. So what's the criteria? Who do you let go if somebody had already absconded before?
Okay, the process basically starts when the person is admitted. I think I've spoken about this before, but it's important that we repeat it. There's something that we call a correctional sentence plan, where a person has to fully understand that this is a plan. It's like a contract between correctional services and the inmate to say, these are the programs that you partake on, this is what is expected of you. You will be assessed halfway through your sentence. You'll be taken before the parole board, and if they deem that you do meet the criteria, you will then be placed out, but that has to be supported by reports from our specialists, such as social workers, psychologists, and others that we have in the system. Then the parole board will make a decision. Unfortunately, some people will then deviate from the parole conditions, meaning that they have to be taken back into our centers, but some will do what we call absconding, meaning that they will no longer comply, run away, and in the process of being on the run, they commit other offenses. Then that's when the entire parole system get married, because they hurt other people. By the time we find them, they've committed a string of offenses, which is so sad. Hence, then as a department, we always make it a call that when a person is placed out, the caregiver or the person that is assigned to accommodate that person has a responsibility to play in terms of saying, reporting that this person is no longer complying, this person has gone back into life of crime, so that we get that person as a matter of agency. Some will say that they were scared. We say, you being scared doesn't really assist much. You have to report that person. Even if you report to the nearest police station, then that will save a life, will save other people, because we cannot afford to have this small group of people denting the whole work that we do. We have a number of parolees who are doing amazing work out there. It is therefore important that we deal with this group so that we can protect the system, but also make it clear that those who have taken advantage of the second chance, they do indeed maximize on it. Hence, as a department, we are looking at the entire review of the parole system, so that at the end of the day, no one is disadvantaged, but those who don't deserve to be out there, they stay within our facilities until such time that they correct their ways.
So society, obviously, as you were describing there, also has a role to play in terms of reporting if somebody absconds their parole. But there's also an indictment on the Correctional Services Department, Mr. Nxumalo, isn't there? Because your mandate is, at the end of the day, rehabilitation.
We will rehabilitate people. We do that on a daily basis. And once a person has been placed out, some will report that they've lost a support system. Therefore, they needed to find food, they needed to survive. They will then opt to go back into a life of crime. And we often say to them, don't just sit in some corner there. Come back to us. Our monitoring officials are there. Their job is not just to monitor parolees, but it is also to assist those who are finding it hard to adjust, because they are then in a position to say, are there any other measures that we can look into so that we can assist this parolee who is now struggling, this parolee who no longer has a home, this parolee who finds himself destitute, to say, rather than taking this person back into our facility, let's see if there's a halfway house, or let's see if there's someone else who could be willing to give this person either a job or a place to stay, and ensuring that this person does comply to those parole conditions. We often say corrections is a societal responsibility. We don't want people to stay in our facilities and die there. We want people to be in our facilities, be rehabilitated, acquire skills, and go out there to make a difference. Hence, then, it does hurt us when people go back into the life of crime.
Just my last question, Mr. Nxumalo. You know, we do remember that back in May of 2020, the president, of course, because we were fighting against a pandemic, did make an announcement that thousands of low-risk prisoners would be released on parole, you know, according to UN advice, to make sure that our prisons are not overcrowded. And we know South Africa has that problem. Did this also contribute to these statistics? I mean, or is it a coincidence that, you know, we're talking about parolees in 2020 and the same announcement happening the same year?
We were monitoring those parolees who were placed out in that dispensation. It's less than 1% of them who reoffended, less than 1%. But as you know, like, in almost daily, a person is placed out on parole, and hence then it's important that we monitor them and also to respond to their specific needs. That particular percentage did very well. Then we managed to see that that those few who reoffended, what was it that drove them into back into the life of crime? Some of them are still with us, but some of them we managed to find solutions to that effect. So as a department, we continue to look at the numbers. Hence, I've said over the years, even people who are placed out on parole, the numbers are decreasing, because in the 2019-2020 financial year, we had 38,000. The following year, which was 2021, it was 33,000. And then 2021 to 2022, we only had about 27,000. These numbers are decreasing. It's not like it's a good indication, but it therefore says we have to find a way where society could warm up to parolees. Societies could be in a position to receive them and see how best we can integrate people, give them those second opportunities, and let parolees prove to people out there that they are worthy of that second chance, so that we can have less people going to life of crime, therefore coming to our facilities. There's more that the country can do with the money that we have to spend as correctional services. That money can go to other developmental programs that the country desperately needs. But if people do commit crime, therefore they have to come to us. When placed out, if they reoffend, sadly, we'll have to fetch them so that they can continue serving their sentences with correctional services.
All right, Mr. Nxumalo, you actually answered the question I was going to ask you about whether or not it also has to do with the stereotype that is with parolees, etc., and the fact that society usually shuns against people who've been in prison for crime. Thank you very much for your time. That was Singabakho Nxumalo. He is the spokesperson of the Correctional Services Department.